The air in Monica's home office felt thick and heavy, like it was pressing down on me as I stood there watching her sign those trust fund papers. The mahogany walls, polished to a dark shine, seemed to close in, making it hard to breathe. She had that smug grin on her face, the one I'd seen too many times during our marriage, the one that said she'd won and didn't care who got hurt. "It's done," she said, her voice sharp and final as she slid the documents across the desk toward Gregory, her new husband. He sat there in his fancy suit, looking every bit the corporate lawyer he was, all smug and satisfied. "All $2 million will go to his son, Luke," she added, like it was some kind of victory speech. I couldn't believe it. That money was supposed to be for our daughter, Haley, our 16-year-old girl who deserved it just as much as anyone. She stood over by the window, her arms crossed, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. She didn't say much at first, just watched her mom like she was studying her. Then she spoke, her voice steady. "Mom, why?" It wasn't loud or whiny. It was just a question, simple and direct, like she already knew the answer but wanted to hear it anyway. Monica didn't even hesitate. "Because Luke is going to law school. He has a future," she snapped, her tone cutting like a knife. Then she turned those cold eyes on Haley. "And you? You're just playing with computers in your apartment." There it was, Monica's favorite line, the one she'd been throwing at Haley for years. She never got it, never saw how much Haley loved coding, how good she was at it. To Monica, it was just a silly hobby, a waste of time. I felt my hands ball into fists at my sides. I wanted to yell, to tell her she was wrong, but I kept my voice steady. "She built an entire AI-driven trading system," I said, trying to make her see. Haley had spent months on that project, late nights, weekends, all of it, teaching herself stuff I couldn't even wrap my head around. She was brilliant, and I wasn't going to let Monica brush that off. But Monica just rolled her eyes, like I'd said something ridiculous. "Oh please, let's not pretend she's some genius. She's wasting time." That was it. The dismissal, the way she always made Haley feel small. It hit me hard, not because of the money, I didn't care about that anymore, but because of how easily she tossed our daughter aside. Haley was worth more than $2 million, more than anything Monica could sign away, and it killed me that her own mom couldn't see it. I was about to say something else, to fight for Haley like I always did, when I saw her face change. She grinned, not a big, loud grin, but a quiet one, like she knew something we didn't. "Dad, it's fine," she said, her voice calm and sure. "I fixed everything." She looked right at me, her eyes bright with something I couldn't quite place. Fixed everything? What did that mean? I didn't have a clue what she was talking about. The trust fund was gone, signed over to Luke, and Monica was sitting there gloating. What could Haley have possibly done? I stood there, staring at her, my mind racing. "What do you mean, fixed everything?" I asked, my voice low, almost afraid of the answer. She didn't say anything right away, just kept that grin on her face, like she was holding a secret she couldn't wait to share. Monica didn't notice. She was too busy smirking at Gregory, probably thinking about how clever she was. Gregory leaned back in his chair, flipping through the papers, not even looking at us. They thought they'd won, thought they'd left Haley with nothing. But I knew my daughter. That grin wasn't just confidence, it was something bigger. I'd seen her like this before, back when she'd figured out how to hack into my old laptop just to prove she could, or when she'd built her first program that tracked stock prices for fun. She didn't give up, didn't back down, not ever. And now, standing there in Monica's fancy office with its big desk and leather chairs, I started to feel something shift inside me. Maybe it wasn't over. Maybe Haley had something up her sleeve. "Haley," I said, stepping closer to her, "what's going on?" My heart was pounding now, not from anger but from curiosity, maybe even hope. She turned to me, her grin widening just a little, and said, "You'll see, Dad. Just trust me." Trust her? Of course I trusted her. She was my kid, the one person in this messed-up family I'd always believed in. But I didn't understand, not yet. How could she fix something like this? The money was gone, the papers were signed, and Monica wasn't the type to change her mind. Monica finally looked up from her little victory party with Gregory. "What are you two whispering about over there?" she asked, her tone dripping with annoyance. "It's done, okay? There's nothing left to talk about." She waved her hand like she was shooing us away, like we were bugs bothering her perfect day. Gregory chuckled, that low, smug laugh of his, and I felt my jaw tighten again. But Haley didn't flinch. She just kept looking at me, ignoring her mom completely. "Let's go home, Dad," she said, her voice still calm, still steady. "I've got something to show you." Home. Our little apartment. Nothing like this big house Monica lived in now with Gregory, but it was ours, and it was where Haley did her best work. I nodded, not sure what else to do. "Okay," I said, glancing back at Monica one last time. She was already turning away, done with us, done with Haley. As we walked out of that office, leaving the mahogany walls and the signed papers behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Haley's grin, her words, they stuck with me, buzzing in my head like a promise. She'd fixed everything, she said. I didn't know how, didn't know what she'd done, but I was about to find out. And deep down, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. Back at our small city apartment that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Haley had said in Monica's office. The way she'd grinned, so calm and sure, telling me she'd fixed everything. It kept playing over and over in my head. I walked through the front door, kicking off my shoes, still feeling the sting of Monica's words about Haley just playing with computers. Our place wasn't much, just a cramped living room, a tiny kitchen, and 2 bedrooms, but it was home. I could hear the faint hum of electronics coming from Haley's room, a sound I'd gotten used to over the years. She was always tinkering, always working on something. I figured she was just unwinding after that awful meeting with her mom, but when I pushed her door open, I froze. She was sitting there, surrounded by screens, 3 of them, all glowing with live financial data, numbers and graphs flickering like some kind of sci-fi movie. Her desk was a mess of cables, a couple of empty soda cans, and her laptop, which she was typing on so fast her fingers were a blur. She didn't even look up at first, just kept going, like she was in her own world. "Dad, I told you I fixed everything," she said, her voice casual, like she was talking about fixing a leaky faucet instead of whatever this was. I stepped inside, my socks sliding a little on the hardwood floor, and shut the door behind me. "Haley, what is all this?" I asked, my eyes darting from one screen to the next. It looked serious, way more than just some kid's hobby. She finally glanced up at me, her face lit by the blue glow of the monitors, and smirked. "This isn't just a trading bot," she said, answering the question I hadn't even asked yet. "It's SAGE, Strategic Algorithmic Global Engine. It predicts market movements days before they happen." I blinked at her, trying to process that. A trading bot? No, she'd said it wasn't just that. This was something bigger, something I didn't understand. "Wait, what?" I said, stepping closer to her desk. "You mean, this thing can tell the future?" I sounded dumb even to myself, but I didn't know how else to say it. Haley laughed, a short, bright sound that made me feel a little less lost. "Not the future, Dad. The market. It's AI, artificial intelligence. I trained it with years of data, patterns, all that stuff. It's not guessing, it's calculating." She turned one of the screens toward me, and I saw a graph with a red line climbing up, up, up. "See this? That's a stock I told it to watch last week. It's about to jump 15% tomorrow morning." Sage knew it before anyone else. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. This wasn't playing with computers, this was insane. My 16-year-old daughter had built something that could outsmart Wall Street. "Haley," I said, sinking into the chair by her bed. "How did you? When did you?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. She leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms over her head like she'd just finished a long day at some big job instead of being a high school kid. "I've been working on it for 2 years, she said. "Started it as a project for fun, but then it got real. Really real." She nodded at the screens. "This is why I didn't care about the trust fund. Sage is worth way more than $2 million already." My head was spinning. 2 years? She'd been doing this under my nose, and I hadn't even noticed? Before I could say anything else, her laptop beeped, and a video call window popped up. A kid's face filled the screen. Logan, her best friend since middle school. He had messy hair and glasses that were always sliding down his nose. "Hey, Haley," he said, then saw me and waved. "Oh, hi, Mr. Carter. Didn't know you were there." I waved back, still dazed. "Logan's my CTO," Haley said, like it was no big deal. "Chief Technology Officer. He's been helping me build the back end." Logan grinned. "We're moving up the timeline," he said. "The investors are ready. They saw the latest numbers, and they're freaking out. In a good way." "Investors?" I repeated, my voice cracking a little. You've got investors? Haley nodded, her smirk turning into a full-on smile. Yeah, Dad. A couple of small venture capital guys found out about Sage online. I posted some demo stuff on a forum. Didn't think it'd blow up like this. They've been emailing me for weeks. Logan and I are meeting them tomorrow. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was talking about a school project instead of a $1 million deal. I just sat there, staring at her. My kid who was supposed to be worrying about homework or prom or something normal. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to catch up. So, let me get this straight, I said. You built an AI that can predict the stock market. It's already worth more than the trust fund Monica gave to Luke. And now you've got investors lined up. Haley nodded again, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Pretty much. Oh, and it's legal too, I checked. No insider trading, just math and code. She tapped her keyboard, and another screen lit up with a dashboard full of numbers. This is what I've been doing, Dad. Not playing. Building. I didn't know what to say. I'd always known Haley was smart. Smarter than me, for sure. But this was next level. I thought back to Monica's smug face, her nasty little jab about Haley wasting time. She had no idea. None of us did. Haley, I said finally, my voice quieter now. Why didn't you tell me? She shrugged, looking at her screens instead of me. I wanted to be sure it worked first. Didn't want to get your hopes up if it flopped. But it's real now. And it's mine. I felt a lump in my throat. Pride mixing with something else. Relief. Maybe. Or just plain awe. She didn't need Monica's money. Didn't need anyone's approval. She'd taken that betrayal and turned it into something huge. Something Monica couldn't touch. You're incredible, I said, and I meant it. She glanced at me, her smile softening. Thanks, Dad. But this is just the start. You'll see. Logan piped up from the screen. Gotta go, Haley. See you tomorrow. Don't forget the pitch deck. The call ended, and it was just us again, the hum of her computers filling the silence. I looked at her, this kid who wasn't a kid anymore, and I knew she was right. This was just the start. Whatever Sage was, whatever she'd built, it was going to change everything. And I couldn't wait to see it. 3 years had flown by since that night in Haley's room, when she'd shown me Sage and turned my world upside down. I still remembered the glow of those screens, the way her voice had been so calm as she explained it all, like she'd already seen the future she was building. Now, standing in the living room of our same little apartment, I barely recognized the life we were living. Haley's company had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. Sage wasn't just some clever program anymore. It was a powerhouse, outperforming Wall Street's best trading models by 99.7%. I'd read that in some finance magazine she'd left on the coffee table, and it still didn't feel real. My daughter, now 19, had done that. My Haley. I was flipping through the mail, mostly junk and a couple of bills, when the doorbell rang. We didn't get many visitors. Haley was usually at her new office downtown, and I kept to myself most days, working my steady but boring job at the warehouse. I figured it was a delivery guy or maybe a neighbor, so I shuffled over and opened the door without much thought. But there, standing on my faded welcome mat, was James Holloway, tall, gray-haired, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my rent. I knew him, sort of. He was a senior partner at Gregory's law firm, one of those big-shot lawyers who showed up on TV, sometimes talking about corporate deals. What the hell was he doing here? Mr. Carter, he said, his voice smooth and professional, like he was about to sell me something. I hope I'm not interrupting. He stuck out his hand, and I shook it, feeling a little dazed. His grip was firm, too firm, like he was trying to prove something. No, not at all, I said, stepping back to let him in. What's this about? My mind was already racing. Had Monica and Gregory sent him? Was this some legal trick about the trust fund, even after all this time? I shut the door behind him, watching as he glanced around our tiny living room, taking in the worn couch and the old TV like he was sizing us up. I didn't realize you were involved in this project, he said, turning back to me with a look that was half surprise, half curiosity. I frowned, confused. What project? I asked, crossing my arms. He raised an eyebrow, like he thought I was playing dumb. Sage, he said, like it was obvious. The trading platform. It's making waves, big waves. I assumed you had a hand in it, given your connection. He paused, waiting for me to catch up. I just stared at him, my brain scrambling to figure out what he meant. Connection? Then it hit me. He was talking about Haley. I'm not, I said, shaking my head. This is all Haley. My daughter. I couldn't help the little swell of pride in my chest when I said it. She'd done it all. Every line of code, every late night, every deal. I was just the guy who made sure she had dinner and a place to crash. James blinked at me, like he hadn't heard right. Wait, Haley Carter, he said, his voice going up a notch. As in, Monica's daughter. He looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under him, and I almost laughed. Almost. Yeah, I said, leaning against the wall. Monica's daughter. My daughter. I watched his face as the pieces clicked together. He didn't know. How could he? Monica and Gregory had spent years acting like Haley was nothing, like her computer stuff was a joke. They'd mocked her, dismissed her, and now here was this fancy lawyer standing in my living room, looking like he'd seen a ghost because of what she'd built. You didn't know? I asked, keeping my tone casual, though inside I was loving every second of this. No, he admitted, running a hand over his jaw. I had no idea. I mean, I'd heard about Sage. Everyone in the industry has. It's remarkable. Beating the top models by nearly a full %? That's unheard of. He shook his head, like he was still trying to wrap his mind around it. I came here because we're representing a client who wants to invest. I thought you might be the point of contact, given the family tie to Gregory's firm. He laughed, a short, dry sound. Guess I got that wrong. I couldn't help but grin. Yeah, you did, I said. Haley runs it. She's the brains, the boss, everything. I'm just her dad. I pointed to the couch. You want to sit? I can get you a coffee or something. He waved a hand, still looking a little off balance. No, I won't take up your time. I needed to see for myself. If Haley's behind this, then, he trailed off, like he didn't know how to finish that sentence. I got it, though. If Haley was behind Sage, then Monica and Gregory were in for a shock. They didn't have a clue what she'd been up to, not really. She's been working on it since she was 16, I said, feeling that pride bubble up again. Started it right after Monica signed away her trust fund to Luke. Guess she didn't need it after all. James's eyes widened, just for a second, before he schooled his face back to that lawyer calm. That's impressive, he said, and I could tell he meant it. Very impressive. I'll need to talk to her directly, then. My client's eager, very eager, to get in on this. Good luck with that, I said, chuckling. She's busy. Got investors lined up around the block. I wasn't exaggerating. Haley had told me about the calls, the emails, the meetings she was juggling. She'd turned our little apartment into a launch pad, and now she was soaring. James nodded, pulling a business card from his pocket and handing it to me. Please, have her call me, he said. This is big, Mr. Carter. Bigger than you might realize. I took the card, glancing at the fancy embossed letters. Oh, I realize, I said. I've been watching her do it. He gave me a look, like he was reassessing me, then headed for the door. Tell her James Holloway stopped by, he said over his shoulder. She'll want to hear what I have to say. And then he was gone, leaving me standing there with his card in my hand and a grin I couldn't wipe off my face. Monica didn't know. Gregory didn't know. But they were about to find out. Haley wasn't just playing anymore. She was winning, and I couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized it. I tossed the card on the table and grabbed my phone to text her. Some big lawyer just showed up. You're making waves, kid. I hit send, picturing her reading it at her shiny new desk downtown, probably smiling that same quiet grin she'd had 3 years ago. This was her moment, and I was damn proud to be along for the ride. That night, after James Holloway left our apartment, I couldn't sit still. My mind kept spinning, replaying his shocked face when he realized Haley was the one behind Sage. I was pacing the living room, the TV flickering with some dumb reality show I wasn't even watching, when Haley's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd left it here earlier, rushing off to her office for some late meeting. I didn't mean to snoop, honest, but the screen lit up with Monica's name, and I couldn't help myself. I picked it up, just to see if it was urgent. The call went to voicemail before I could decide what to do, but then it rang again. Monica, twice in a row. That wasn't like her. She usually acted like Haley didn't exist unless she wanted something. I set the phone down, figuring Haley would deal with it when she got home, but curiosity was eating at me. What did Monica want now? Had she heard about Sage? About James showing up? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Haley burst through the door about an hour later, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her face flushed like she'd run up the stairs. Hey, Dad, she said, dropping her bag by the couch. Long day. You eat yet? She headed for the fridge, but I stopped her. Your phone's been buzzing, I said, nodding at the counter. Your mom called. Twice. Haley froze for a second, then shrugged like it was no big deal. Oh, she said, grabbing the phone and glancing at the screen. Figures. She didn't call Monica back right away, just opened the fridge, pulled out a soda, and cracked it open. I watched her, leaning against the counter. You gonna see what she wants? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Inside, I was dying to know. Monica hadn't reached out like this in years, not since the trust fund mess. Haley took a long sip, then smirked at me. Yeah, I'll call her. Might as well see what's got her worked up. She hit the button, put it on speaker, and set the phone on the counter between us. It rang once, twice, then Monica picked up. Haley, what the hell is going on? Her voice was sharp, loud enough to make me wince. No hello, no how are you? Just straight to it, like she was mad about something. Haley didn't flinch. She leaned back against the fridge, crossing her arms, and said, Hey, Mom. What's up? Her tone was so sweet, so innocent, I almost laughed. She knew exactly how to play this. Don't what's up me? Monica snapped. Gregory just got a call from James Holloway. He said something about you and some trading company? Sage. Said it's worth millions. What is this, Haley? I could hear the disbelief in her voice, the way it cracked a little, like she couldn't make sense of it. Gregory and Luke had just found out, probably from James spilling the beans, and now Monica was scrambling. I looked at Haley, waiting to see what she'd do. Her smirk widened, and she took another sip of her soda before answering. Oh, that, she said, all casual. Yeah, it's just something I've been working on. You know, playing with computers. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could picture Monica's face, those pinched lips, the way her eyes narrowed when she was caught off guard. She'd thrown those exact words back at Haley 3 years ago, mocking her, and now here they were, slapping her in the face. Playing with computers? Monica repeated, her voice tight. James said it's outperforming every trading model out there. Said it's worth more than every client Gregory has combined. Is that true? She sounded desperate now, like she needed Haley to say it was a lie, a mistake, anything but the truth. Haley glanced at me, her eyes sparkling with something fierce. Pretty much, she said. It's doing okay. Better than okay, actually. She wasn't bragging, not outright, but she didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves, and Monica knew it. I could hear Gregory in the background, muttering something I couldn't make out, probably freaking out. Luke, too. His voice came through, high and whiny. Wait, Haley's thing? That tech startup you laughed at? I bit my lip to keep from grinning. Oh, this was good. They'd mocked her, dismissed her, and now her little hobby was bigger than their whole world. Haley, Monica said, trying to pull herself together, why didn't you tell me about this? Her tone shifted, softer now, like she was fishing for an apology or an explanation. Haley didn't bite. Didn't think you'd care, she said, still sweet as sugar. You were pretty busy with Luke's law school stuff, right? Figured you had your hands full. Another jab, sharp and perfect, and I could almost feel Monica flinch through the phone. She didn't say anything for a second, and I wondered if she was finally getting it. How wrong she'd been, how much she'd underestimated our girl. Well, Monica said at last, this is unexpected. We should talk about it. You and me. She was trying to take control again, like she could just step in and act like none of the past 3 years had happened. Haley tilted her head, looking at the phone like it was a puzzle she'd already solved. Sure, Mom, she said. Maybe someday. I'm kind of busy right now, though. Got a meeting in the morning. And then, before Monica could say another word, she hung up. Just like that. Click. And the line went dead. I stared at her, my mouth half open. Haley, I said. I didn't even know how to finish. Savage. Brilliant. She laughed, tossing her empty soda can in the trash. She'll get over it, she said. Or she won't. Doesn't matter. She grabbed her phone and headed for her room, but I stopped her again. Wait, I said. They know now? Gregory, Luke, they're freaking out. How's that feel? I needed to hear it. Needed to know she was as proud as I was. She turned back to me, her smile softening. Feels good, Dad, she said. Really good. They thought I was nothing, and now they're scared. That's all I wanted. She shrugged, like it was simple, but I saw the fire in her eyes. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about taking back everything they'd tried to take from her. I nodded, feeling that same fire catch in my chest. "You're something else," I said, and she grinned before disappearing into her room. I stood there in the kitchen, the quiet settling around me. Monica and Gregory had laughed at her, thought she'd fade away without that trust fund. But Haley had built something bigger, something they couldn't ignore. And now they knew. The shockwaves were hitting, and I had a front row seat. I couldn't wait to see what she did next. The buzz around Haley and Sage had been building for weeks, but it was nothing compared to what was happening now. Investors were lining up, big ones, not just the small-time venture guy she'd started with. Banks, hedge funds, even the SEC, they all wanted to know how Sage was predicting market crashes before they happened, and how it was doing it legally. I'd been reading about it online, trying to keep up with Haley's world, but it was like trying to drink from a fire hose. She was everywhere, her name popping up in articles and on TV, while I was just her dad, watching from the sidelines, proud as hell. But then Monica did something I never saw coming. She showed up at Haley's office. I wasn't there when it happened. Haley told me about it later that night, back at the apartment. I'd been heating up some leftover pizza, the smell filling our tiny kitchen, when she walked in, looking tired but sharp, like she'd just won a fight. "You'll never guess who came by today," she said, dropping her bag by the door and kicking off her shoes. I turned off the oven and leaned against the counter, raising an eyebrow. "Who?" I asked, though part of me already knew. She smirked, grabbing a slice of pizza from the pan. "Mom," she said, taking a bite. Showed up out of nowhere, acting like she owned the place. I froze, the plate I'd been holding halfway to the counter. "Monica," I said, like I needed to make sure I'd heard right. "At your office?" Haley nodded, chewing slowly, her eyes glinting with that mix of amusement and steel I'd come to know so well. "Yep," she said. Walked right in, past the front desk, all high heels and attitude. Said she needed to talk to me. I could picture it. Monica in one of her power suits, her hair perfect, marching into Haley's sleek downtown office like she still had some say in her life. It made my stomach twist, but I wanted to hear every detail. What did she want? I asked, setting the plate down and crossing my arms. Haley hopped up on the counter, swinging her legs like she was a kid again, not a 19-year-old running a multi-million-dollar company. She didn't say much at first, she told me. Just stood there, looking around like she was sizing it up, the glass walls, the screens, the team hustling. Then she said, "Haley, I need to talk to you." Like it was urgent or something. Haley paused, mimicking Monica's tight-lipped tone so perfectly I almost laughed. I was in the middle of a call with some hedge fund guy, so I just leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, and said, "Oh, now you want to talk?" She grinned at me, and I could see it. Haley in her big office chair, cool as ice, staring down her mom. What did she say to that? I asked, grabbing a slice of pizza for myself. I needed something to do with my hands. My nerves were jumping, imagining this showdown. Haley shrugged. She hesitated, she said. Looked like she didn't know what to do. For the first time, Dad, she wasn't in control. It was awesome. She took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. Then she goes, all quiet. "You should have told me." Like I owed her that or something. Haley rolled her eyes, and I felt a surge of anger mix with my pride. Told her? After everything Monica had done, signing away the trust fund, mocking Haley's dreams, now she wanted in on the action? "What did you say?" I asked, my voice low. I could feel my jaw tightening, thinking about Monica standing there, acting like she deserved a piece of Haley's success. Haley's grin faded a little, but her eyes stayed hard. I said, "You never asked." That's it. Just looked at her and let it sink in. She hopped off the counter, brushing crumbs off her jeans. She didn't know what to say, Dad. Just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then she mumbled something about being busy and left. Walked out faster than she came in. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She didn't fight? Didn't try to argue? I asked, surprised. Monica wasn't the type to back down easy. She'd always been stubborn, always had to have the last word. Haley shook her head. Nope. I think she knew she couldn't win. Not this time. She's got nothing on me now. No money, no power, nothing. Sage is mine, and she can't touch it. She grabbed her soda from the fridge, popping it open with a hiss. It felt good, Dad. Real good. I nodded, taking that in. Good didn't even cover it. I could feel it in my chest, this hot, fierce pride for my girl. Monica had spent years treating Haley like she was less, like Luke was the golden child with his law school dreams, while Haley was just some kid messing around. And now? Now Monica was the one scrambling, showing up uninvited, trying to figure out how she'd missed it all. She's scared, I said, more to myself than to Haley. She knows you're bigger than her now. Yeah, Haley said, sipping her soda. And Gregory, too. Logan heard from some guy at the firm. Apparently Gregory's been losing it, trying to figure out how Sage works. Keeps asking if it's legal, like he's hoping to find a loophole to shut me down. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. He won't. I made sure of that. It's all above board. Math and code, no tricks. I believed her. Haley was smart, smarter than me, smarter than Monica or Gregory, and she'd built this thing to last. I leaned back against the counter, watching her. So what now? I asked. She's gonna keep coming around, you know? Monica doesn't give up that easy. Haley shrugged again, but her smile was back, quieter this time. Let her try, she said. I don't need her. Never did. This, she waved a hand, like she was pointing at everything. The office, Sage, her life now. This is what matters. She can't take it away. She finished her pizza and tossed the crust in the trash. I've got investors to deal with tomorrow. Big ones. That's my focus. I watched her grab her bag and head for her room, her steps light, like she'd just brushed off the whole thing. But I couldn't shake it. Monica showing up, hesitating, losing her grip. For the first time, she'd seen Haley for what she really was, unstoppable. I stayed in the kitchen, finishing my pizza, letting it sink in. Haley didn't just win today, she'd flipped the whole game. Monica thought she'd played her final move with that trust fund, but Haley had been planning something bigger all along. And now, standing in our little apartment, I knew this was just the beginning. The day of the IPO announcement felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. Haley had been working toward this for months, years, really, and now it was here. Sage was going public, and the whole world was watching. I'd taken the day off work, something I never did, because there was no way I was missing this. Haley had invited me to the big event at her office, a sleek, glass-walled building downtown that still blew my mind every time I saw it. She'd gone from coding in her messy bedroom to running a company valued at $800 million, and today was the day she'd show everyone what that meant. I put on my best shirt, a tie I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding, and headed out, feeling nervous and proud all at once. When I got there, the place was buzzing, reporters, investors, employees, all milling around under bright lights and big screens flashing Sage's logo. Haley was everywhere, her face on the Wall Street Journal cover pinned to a board, her name in bold on Forbes and Bloomberg headlines scrolling across a ticker. I stood near the back, trying to stay out of the way, just taking it all in. She'd told me Monica and Gregory were coming. Somehow they'd scored invites, probably through James Holloway or one of their fancy connections. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but Haley had shrugged it off when I asked. Let them come, she'd said. They'll see what they missed. The room quieted down as Haley stepped up to a podium, looking sharp in a dark blazer and jeans, her hair pulled back. She was 19, but she carried herself like someone twice her age, calm, confident, in control. I saw Monica and Gregory near the front. Luke slouched beside them, all dressed up like they belonged there. Monica's face was tight, her lips pressed thin, while Gregory kept adjusting his tie, looking uncomfortable. Luke just stared at his phone, like he didn't care. I wondered what they were thinking, seeing Haley up there, the kid they'd laughed at now the center of this massive moment. Haley tapped the mic, and the chatter stopped. Thanks for being here, she said, her voice steady, filling the room. Today's a big day for Sage. We're not just launching an IPO. We're changing how the world sees the market. She paused, letting that sink in, and I felt my chest swell. She wasn't nervous, not a bit. She owned this. 3 years ago, she went on, I started this in my bedroom. No funding, no fancy degrees. Just me, some code, and a lot of late nights. A few people laughed, but I saw Monica shift in her seat, her eyes narrowing. Haley didn't look at her yet, just kept talking, laying out how Sage worked, how it predicted trends no one else could touch. Then she shifted gears. We're valued at $800 million today, she said, and the room erupted. Claps, cheers, a few gasps. I clapped too, my hands stinging, unable to stop grinning. 800 million. My kid did that. Haley waited for the noise to die down, then leaned into the mic. That's not luck. That's math. That's work. And it's proof that you don't need someone else's money to build something real. Her voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, a sharpness I knew was aimed right at her mom and Gregory. I glanced at them. Monica's face was pale, her hands clenched in her lap. Gregory looked sick, his mouth half open like he couldn't believe it. I heard her whisper to him, her voice low but clear enough to carry. Luke was supposed to be the successful one. She sounded dazed, like the numbers didn't add up in her head. Gregory swallowed hard, his eyes darting to Haley, then back to Monica. He's a junior associate at my firm, he muttered. Haley just became a billionaire at 19. His voice was flat, defeated, and I couldn't help it. I smiled. A real, big, stupid smile. They'd bet on the wrong kid, and now they were choking on it. Luke finally looked up from his phone, his face red, like he'd just realized where he was. He didn't say anything, just sank lower in his chair. Haley wrapped up her speech, thanking her team. Logan got a shout-out, standing off to the side with a grin, and the investors who'd believed in her. Then she stepped away from the podium, and a big screen behind her lit up with the stock ticker. The room held its breath as the numbers started rolling. Sage's shares, live on the market for the first time. They shot up fast, climbing past the opening price in seconds, and the cheers came back, louder than before. I clapped again, my throat tight. She'd done it. Really done it. Afterward, people swarmed her, reporters with mics, suits with business cards, but I stayed back, watching. Monica and Gregory didn't move at first, just sat there like they were glued to their seats. I saw Monica whisper something to Gregory, her face pinched, then stand up, smoothing her skirt like she was trying to pull herself together. Gregory followed, tugging Luke along, and they started toward Haley. I tensed, wondering what they'd say, what they could possibly say after all this. I edged closer, close enough to hear, but not so close they'd notice me. Monica reached Haley just as the crowd thinned out a bit. "Haley," she said, her voice softer than I'd expected. That was impressive. It sounded forced, like she had to choke it out. Haley turned to her, her expression blank, unreadable. "Thanks," she said, short and flat. Monica hesitated, then tried again. "I didn't know it was this big," she said. "You've done well." I waited for Haley to snap, to throw it all back in her face, but she didn't. She just nodded. "Yeah," she said. "I have." Gregory cleared his throat, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We're proud of you," he said, and I almost laughed out loud. Proud. Now. Haley didn't even blink. "Good to know," she said, then turned away, back to the people who actually mattered, her team, her investors. Monica stood there, frozen, her hands twitching like she wanted to grab Haley back. Luke muttered something under his breath, probably a curse, and stalked off toward the exit. Gregory put a hand on Monica's arm, steering her away, and I watched them go, their shoulders slumped. I couldn't stop smiling. Haley didn't need their pride, their approval, none of it. She'd taken the stage, rung the bell on her own terms, and left them in the dust. As the room kept buzzing, I caught her eye across the crowd. She grinned at me, that same quiet grin from 3 years ago, and I knew. This was her victory, and I'd never been prouder. The moment Haley rang the IPO bell at the New York Stock Exchange was one I'd never forget. I'd made the trip with her that morning, riding the subway together like it was just another day, even though we both knew it wasn't. She'd been quiet, focused, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, while I kept sneaking looks at her, trying to wrap my head around what was about to happen. My 19-year-old daughter was about to take Sage public, and the world was watching. When we got there, the place was packed. Traders, reporters, big shots in suits, all crammed onto the trading floor under those huge screens. I felt out of place in my old jacket and tie, but Haley didn't care. She'd insisted I come, said I belonged there as much as anyone. They'd set up a platform for her, right in the heart of it all, with the bell hanging above like some kind of trophy. I stood off to the side, near a railing where I could see everything but stay out of the spotlight. Monica, Gregory, and Luke were in the front row, invited again, probably through some connection Gregory had pulled. I didn't like it, but Haley had shrugged it off when I'd asked. "Let them watch," she'd said, her voice cool. "They'll see what they threw away." Now, as she stepped up to the podium, I could feel the air shift, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for her. She looked out at the crowd, her face calm, her hands steady as she gripped the mic. 3 years ago, she started, her voice clear and strong. I was told I was just playing with computers, that I wasn't worth investing in. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, just let those words hang there, heavy and sharp. I saw Monica's head snap up, her eyes locking on Haley. Gregory shifted in his seat, his face tight, while Luke just stared, his mouth a thin line. Haley didn't look at them yet, just kept going. But I didn't need anyone else's money or approval. I built Sage from nothing, and today, we're here. The room was dead quiet, every eye on her. I felt my chest tighten, pride mixing with something else. Anger, maybe, at how Monica had treated her, how they'd all dismissed her. Haley's gaze swept the crowd, then landed right on the front row, on Monica, Gregory, and Luke. This is for everyone who thought I couldn't, she said, and I knew she meant them. Her voice didn't waver, didn't crack. It was steel, pure and simple. Then she stepped back, reached up, and rang the bell. The sound echoed through the floor, sharp and loud, and the place exploded. Cheers roared up, traders shouting, cameras flashing. The big screens lit up with Sage's ticker, and the stock surged, jumping 20% in seconds, then 30%. I clapped hard, my hands stinging, grinning so wide my face hurt. Haley stood there, arms crossed, watching the numbers climb like it was just another day at the office. But I knew better. This was her reckoning, her way of showing them all. I glanced at Monica, and she looked like she might pass out. Her face was white, her hands gripping the edge of her chair, eyes wide as she stared at the screens. Gregory was muttering something to her, his voice lost in the noise, while Luke just slumped back, looking dazed. The energy didn't let up. People rushed the platform, reporters yelling questions, traders slapping each other's backs. I stayed where I was, letting Haley have her moment, but I couldn't take my eyes off her family down front. Monica's lips were moving, like she was trying to say something to herself, but no sound came out. Gregory kept shaking his head, his tie crooked now, like he'd been pulling at it. Luke finally stood up, shoving his hands in his pockets, and I heard him snap, "This is bullshit," before pushing through the crowd toward the exit. I almost laughed, typical Luke, running when it got tough. Haley handled the chaos like a pro, answering questions with that cool, steady tone of hers. I caught bits of it. Sage uses proprietary algorithms. No, it's all legal. We're just getting started. And every word made me prouder. She didn't need me up there, didn't need anyone holding her hand. This was her show, and she was running it. The stock kept climbing, hitting 50% above the opening price, and the cheers got louder. I saw a guy in a suit near me pump his fist, yelling, "She's a genius," and I nodded to myself. Damn right she was. When things finally calmed down, Haley stepped off the platform, shaking hands with some bigwig in a pinstripe suit. I figured that was my cue to move closer, weaving through the crowd to find her. But before I got there, I saw Monica stand up, her movements jerky, like she wasn't sure what to do. Gregory grabbed her arm, whispering something, but she shook him off and started toward Haley. I stopped, hanging back, close enough to hear. Monica reached her just as Haley turned, her face blank, like she'd been expecting this. "Haley," Monica said, her voice shaky but loud enough to cut through the chatter. I didn't realize." She stopped, swallowing hard, her hands twisting together. Haley just looked at her, eyebrows raised a little, waiting. "Realize what?" she asked, her tone flat. Monica flinched, like the words had stung. "This," she said, waving a hand at the screens, the crowd, the chaos. "What you've done. It's incredible." She was trying. I could tell, trying to bridge something. Maybe, but it sounded weak, hollow after everything. Haley didn't move, didn't soften. "Yeah," she said. "It is." She let that sit there, not giving Monica an inch. Gregory stepped up behind Monica, his face red, like he was embarrassed to even be part of this. "We're happy for you," he said, but it came out stiff, forced. Haley's eyes flicked to him, then back to Monica. "Thanks," she said, short and sharp, then turned away, done with them. Monica stood there, frozen, her mouth open like she wanted to say more, but Haley was already moving on, back to her team. I watched Monica deflate, her shoulders sagging as Gregory pulled her toward the exit. She looked back once, just for a second, and I saw something in her eyes. Regret. Maybe, or just shock. They'd lost, and they knew it. I pushed through the crowd to Haley, catching her as she laughed with Logan about something. "Hey," I said, and she turned, grinning at me. "You okay?" She nodded. "Better than okay, Dad. Did you see their faces?" I laughed, loud and free. "Yeah," I said. "I saw. You killed it." And she had. Killed every doubt, every jab, right there in front of the world. After the chaos of the IPO bell ringing at the New York Stock Exchange, I figured things would settle down a bit, but I should have known better with Haley. The ceremony had ended, the crowd was thinning out, and the trading floor was buzzing with that leftover energy, traders still shouting, screens flashing Sage's stock as it kept climbing. I'd hung back, letting Haley soak in her moment, watching her shake hands and dodge reporters like she'd been doing it her whole life. My chest was still tight with pride, my hands sore from clapping, and I couldn't stop replaying how she'd stared down Monica, Gregory, and Luke, ringing that bell like a declaration of war she'd already won. I was about to head over to her, maybe grab her for a quick hug before we got out of there, when I saw Monica moving through the crowd again. She'd left with Gregory after Haley brushed her off, but here she was, back on the floor, her heels clicking sharp against the tiles. Gregory trailed behind her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and Luke was nowhere in sight, probably sulking somewhere after his little outburst. Monica's face was different now, softer somehow, like she'd had time to think and was trying a new angle. I stayed where I was, half hidden by a pillar, close enough to hear but far enough to keep out of it. This was Haley's fight, not mine. She reached Haley just as my daughter was finishing up with some suit who'd been gushing about Sage's numbers. "Haley," Monica said, her voice quieter than before, almost careful. Haley turned, her expression blank, like she wasn't surprised to see her mom again. "Yeah," she said, crossing her arms, waiting. Monica took a breath, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "I'm proud of you," she said, and I almost choked on the air. Proud? After everything? It sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced it on the walk back, but it still hit me hard. Monica, admitting something like that, even if it was late. Haley's face didn't change. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just looked at Monica, her eyes steady. "Thanks," she said, her voice flat, giving nothing away. "But I don't need your approval." It wasn't mean, wasn't loud, just a fact, plain and simple, and it landed like a punch. Monica flinched, just a little, her lips parting like she wanted to argue but didn't know how. I could see her struggling, trying to find a way in, but Haley wasn't opening the door. Not even a crack. Gregory stepped up beside Monica, clearing his throat like he thought he could help. "It's a hell of a thing you've built," he said, nodding toward the screens. "Really impressive." Haley glanced at him, her head tilting slightly. "Yeah," she said. "I know." That was it. No thank you. No softness, just the truth. She didn't need their praise, didn't want it. I felt a grin tug at my mouth. My girl was tougher than I'd ever been, cutting through their weak attempts like they were nothing. Monica tried again, her voice dropping lower. "I should have seen it," she said. "What you were doing. I didn't understand." It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology, at least that I'd heard, but it still sounded hollow to me. Too little, too late. Haley didn't budge. "You didn't want to," she said, her tone even, like she was stating the weather. "You had Luke to worry about, right? Law school, big future." There was no venom in it, just a quiet jab that hit harder because of how calm she was. Monica's face went tight, her eyes flickering with something. Guilt, maybe, or just frustration. Before she could respond, Luke came stomping back through the crowd, his face red, his tie loose. "I can't believe this," he muttered, loud enough for us all to hear. He stopped next to Gregory, glaring at Haley like she'd stolen something from him personally. "You're seriously a billionaire now? From that computer crap?" Haley turned to him, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Yep," she said. "And you're still a junior associate. Funny how that works." Luke's mouth dropped open, and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Gregory put a hand on Luke's shoulder, probably to shut him up, but Haley wasn't done. "You underestimated me," she said, looking at all three of them now. Monica, Gregory, Luke. "That was your first mistake." She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. The words were enough, sharp and final, cutting through the noise of the trading floor. Luke sputtered, "That's not," but Gregory yanked him back, muttering something about keeping it together. Monica just stood there, her hands still, her face pale. "Haley," she started, but Haley shook her head, cutting her off. "I've got work to do," she said, and turned away, walking toward Logan and a couple of her team members who were waving her over. She didn't look back, not once. Monica stared after her, her mouth half open, like she couldn't believe it was over that fast. Gregory tugged at her arm, his voice low. "Let's go," he said, and she nodded, slow and stiff, letting him lead her out. I watched them leave, Monica's shoulders hunched, Gregory's head down, Luke trailing behind like a kicked dog. The screens above kept flashing Sage's stock, still climbing, still breaking records, and I couldn't help but feel it in my bones. Haley had won, completely and totally. I pushed off the pillar and made my way to her, weaving through the last of the crowd. She was laughing with Logan about something. Her face lit up, and when she saw me, she grinned. "Hey, Dad," she said. "You catch all that?" "Yeah," I said, grinning back. Every word. "You okay?" She nodded, her eyes bright. "Better than okay. They're gone, and I'm still here. That's what counts." I laughed, pulling her into a quick hug, not caring who saw. "You're damn right it does," I said. "You showed them, kid." She hugged me back, then stepped away, already turning to her team. "Gotta wrap up here," she said. "But we're celebrating later, right?" I nodded. "You bet." As she walked off, I looked back at the empty spot where Monica had stood, her weak "I'm proud of you" still ringing in my ears. It didn't matter, none of it did. Haley didn't need their approval, their regret, their anything. She'd built her own world, and they were just shadows in it now. I stuffed my hands in my pockets, watching her move through her people, and felt lighter than I had in years. The aftermath was hers to shape, and I knew she'd make it something incredible. Months after the IPO, life felt different. Not just for Haley, but for me too. Sage wasn't slowing down. It was growing faster than ever, expanding internationally now, with offices popping up in London, Tokyo, even Dubai. I'd see Haley on video calls at all hours, talking to people halfway across the world, her voice steady and sure like she'd been doing it forever. She'd hired Logan as COO, Chief Operating Officer. She explained to me one night over takeout, and he was thriving, running the day-to-day stuff so she could focus on the big picture. I'd watch her sometimes, late at night in our apartment, her laptop glowing as she typed, and I'd marvel at how far she'd come. My kid, my Haley, was changing the game, and I was just trying to keep up. One afternoon, I got a text from her while I was at work, unloading boxes at the warehouse. "Bought out 2 hedge funds today," it said, followed by a little smiley face. I stared at it, my hands sweaty on my phone, trying to picture what that even meant. Hedge funds, those big money machines run by suits who thought they owned the world, were now hers. I texted back, "You serious?" And she replied, "Yep, part of the plan." That was Haley, always 3 steps ahead, always with a plan. I shook my head, grinning, and went back to work, feeling that familiar pride settle in my chest. She didn't need anyone's money anymore. She was making her own, and then some. Meanwhile, Monica and Gregory were struggling. I didn't have to guess at that. I heard it straight from the source. Haley had come home one night, tossing her keys on the counter, and told me about a call she'd overheard between Logan and some guy at Gregory's firm. "They're losing clients," she'd said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "Big ones. People are pulling out, investing with us instead." She'd smirked then, that quiet, fierce smirk I loved. Guess they don't trust Gregory's advice anymore. Not when Sage is beating everyone. I'd laughed, picturing Gregory's red face, his tie all twisted up like it had been at the IPO. Served him right. I didn't see Monica much, hadn't since the stock exchange, but I got bits and pieces from Haley, who'd hear things through the grapevine. One day, she came home with a story that made my jaw drop. "Mom called Logan," she said, flopping onto the couch. "Tried to get him to set up a meeting with me." I'd been halfway through a sandwich and nearly choked. "What?" I said, wiping my mouth. "She went through Logan?" Haley nodded, laughing. "Yeah, guess she figured I wouldn't pick up if it was her." "She's right, I wouldn't." I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. Monica, desperate enough to call Haley's best friend? That was new. What did Logan say? I asked, curious. Haley grinned. Told her I was busy, which I am. Then he hung up. She stretched out on the couch, kicking her shoes off. "She's freaking out, Dad. Logan heard from someone that she and Gregory had a big fight." yelling in their fancy house, loud enough the neighbors heard. I raised an eyebrow. About what? Haley shrugged. Money, probably. Or me. Maybe both. She didn't sound worried, just amused, like it was a show she was watching from far away. I couldn't help but dig a little more. What else you hear? I asked, finishing my sandwich. She sat up, crossing her legs. Monica told Gregory they should have supported me, she said. Said it out loud, like she just figured it out. Gregory snapped back that they should have kept the trust fund, like that would have changed anything. She rolled her eyes, and I laughed, loud and sharp. Kept the trust fund? I said. What? So they could have bragged about giving you a head start. You didn't need it. Haley nodded. Exactly. I built this without them. That's what kills them. It did kill them. I could see it in my head. Monica pacing that big house, Gregory slouched at his desk, both of them realizing they'd bet on the wrong horse. Luke wasn't helping either. Haley said he was still a junior associate, barely scraping by at the firm, while she was out here buying hedge funds like they were groceries. I thought about that trust fund, the $2 million Monica had signed over to him, and how small it looked now. Haley's empire was worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions soon, and she'd done it all herself. No handouts, no favors, just her brain and her grit. I saw it play out in little ways, too. One night, Haley showed me a news clip on her phone, some finance guy talking about Sage's latest move, buying out those hedge funds. She's rewriting the rules, the guy said, all excited. Haley Carter's a force. I watched it twice, grinning like an idiot, then handed the phone back. They're calling you a force, I said. She shrugged, but her smile was real. Guess I am, she said. Next up's Europe. Got a meeting in London next week. London. My kid was going to London to run her empire, and I was still here, stacking boxes. It was wild. As the months went on, Sage kept growing, and Monica and Gregory kept fading. Haley didn't talk about them much, just dropped those little updates when they came up, but I could tell she enjoyed it, the way they were scrambling while she soared. One evening, we were eating pizza at the kitchen table, and she looked at me, her eyes serious for once. Dad, she said, you think they'll ever get it? That they messed up. I chewed my bite, thinking it over. Maybe, I said. Monica's starting to, I think. Gregory's too stubborn. Luke's just mad. But it doesn't matter, they can't change it now. She nodded, picking at her slice. Yeah, she said. I don't care if they get it. I'm not doing this for them. She looked up, her grin back. I'm doing it for me. And you. That hit me hard, right in the chest. Me? I said, my voice rough. She laughed. Yeah, Dad. You believed in me when they didn't. That's why I'm here. I didn't know what to say. Just sat there, feeling my eyes sting, and finally managed. You're something else, kid. Cause of you, she said, and went back to her pizza like it was nothing. I leaned back, watching her, this girl who'd built a legacy from scratch. Monica and Gregory could regret all they wanted. It wouldn't touch her. She'd outgrown them, outbuilt them, and now she was leaving them behind. I knew then, sitting in our little kitchen, that this was her story, her empire, and I was damn lucky to be part of it.